Boston and Springfield, Mass. 2024. A tale of two very different cities. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I got a quick video for you guys today, and I promise I'll be back next week with one of my usual true crime documentary style videos. I've just been really sick this week, but I want to have something for you on Saturday like I always do. I noticed that two of the largest cities in the Bay State have had record-breaking years recently. Unfortunately, the two cities are going in completely different directions. Boston, which since the late 90s has been on a trajectory to become one of the safest big cities in the entire country, had one of their safest years ever last year. The city recorded its lowest body count of 37. That's a record low for Boston, which has been trending in this direction for years. Last year, the city only recorded 40, and except for a brief spike from 2007 to 2011, this has been the case in the new millennium. Except for a few dangerous pockets in the city which are ever shrinking thanks to gentrification, the city is overall incredibly safe as far as big cities go today. Now, the Bay State's third largest city, Springfield, is moving in the exact opposite direction. Springfield had a record-setting year themselves in 2023, but for a much grimmer statistic. Springfield had a body count of 31 in 2023, which more than doubled from the previous year's 14. The whole situation is very disturbing. Not only that Springfield, which is roughly one-fifth of Boston's total population, just a fraction, had only 6 less than the much larger city, but the astronomical jump in 1 year's time from 14 to 31 is probably the most troubling statistic. I made a video a few months ago about the 10 most dangerous cities in Massachusetts. I put Springfield at number 1, and I'm going to stay with that decision. My point in that video was the way they make those lists make no sense. The majority of the lists I found online had Webster and North Adams at number 1. I don't understand how a city or town can be considered the most dangerous in the whole state with a 0 body count. Now, regardless of the many holes you can find in statistics, something is clearly very wrong in Springfield, Mass. The Western Mass city's crime rate is 4 times higher than Boston's. Like always, there's many social and cultural issues that affect the crime rates in cities. Boston has become the shining jewel of a city with some of the world's best universities, hospitals, and financial institutions. Whole new neighborhoods like the Seaport District have popped up in the past decade or so. The industrial wasteland that I remember surrounding the Children's Museum when I was a kid is now full of fancy restaurants, boutique shops, luxury condos, and apartments. The amount of construction that's been going on in the city is mind-blowing. I swear almost every time I would drive into the city pre-COVID, the skyline looked different. My buddy was a union carpenter, and the scale of some of the jobs were crazy. The amount of money people have to invest is mind-boggling. Boston and the surrounding areas are where people with money want to be, and that makes it kind of suck for people that don't have it. This unfortunately isn't the case in western Massachusetts. Once you drive out past the western suburbs on the Mass Pike, the state becomes very different. I think a lot of people from outside the area think the majority of Massachusetts outside of Boston are these lofty upscale suburbs, a lot of lefty yuppie type people. While unfortunately on the coast from Cape Ann down to Cape Cod, this is more often than not the case, out west not so. Once you get past Worcester, the state is very rural. You're more apt to see a dude driving a beater truck with a John Deere hat on than someone with their collars popped and a sweater tied around their shoulders. There's also a lot of depression. While Boston and the surrounding areas have become a financial hub of sorts, there's little to no economy out in the western part of the state. The majority of the concentrated areas were built upon industrial sites, mill towns, factories, etc. When most of these blue-collar industries started dying off in the 20th century, so did the social fabric of a lot of these communities. I used to love going on road trips with my dad when I was a kid, going out to these old industrial towns and cities in the western part of the state. I've always thought the architecture is beautiful, and to look at these old towns and try to imagine what they were like back in their heyday. It really is much different than the coastal area of Massachusetts, even back when I was a kid in the 80s and early 90s. There's a lot of natural beauty out in these areas as well. The Berkshires are amazing. I literally just visited them for the first time a few years ago with my oldest daughter. And I remember going to my cousin's wedding down on the Connecticut border, and there was all these tobacco farms. I didn't even realize there was landscapes like that in Massachusetts. But when you roll into one of these old depressed mill towns, it's dreary to say the least. There's little to no jobs. What work there usually is low paying entry level work, and even those are scarce to find. Addiction is through the roof, the signs are everywhere, and crime, violent and non-violent, are much higher than the rest of the state averages. It's not just Springfield, although they are the most glaring case in the state currently. Holyoke literally looks like some kind of post-apocalyptic nightmare. While there's no argument, it's no doubt much more dangerous than certain Boston neighborhoods or public housing projects, but just try waking up every day and have to face the world when you're looking out the window at that. This is where the big problem, in my opinion, lies. It's getting increasingly more expensive to live in areas that are deemed nicer, safer, better places to live. I can look out my window and see the ocean. Since this building's been here for over 100 years, you can see the ocean. That has not changed. But in the past 10 years, the price of that view has gone from $700 to $2,700 and rising. My mom's family has lived on Cape Ann for over 7 generations. Boat builders, fishermen, you name it. But now, unless someone has property to hand down to you, or unless you're extremely wealthy, you won't be able to live in one of these Mass Bay communities much longer. People on the lower end of the socio-economic spectrum are being increasingly forced into pockets of what are deemed less desirable communities. In my opinion, I'm sure I'm not alone, violent crime is just a symptom of a bigger overall problem in society. Like in the late 80s and early 90s, when Boston was virtually a city on fire, community and city leaders all came together and they started thinking outside the box. They realized they couldn't simply arrest their way out of the problem, that they had to offer the youth a way out of that dead-end lifestyle. There was a lot of socio-economic factors that contributed to the escalating levels of violence. They understood this and they did something about it. The result was the Boston Miracle, a record-setting drop in crime and model that was copied in many other big cities nationally. But what happened after? Some people got notoriety, some people moved on, and many of the same situations have played out in the same neighborhoods for decades since, just like in the 90s, only to a much smaller degree. But for the most part, Boston just continues to gentrify out unsavory neighborhoods and replace them with shining seaport districts. As a result, Boston is a much safer, cleaner, and expensive city. It also, in my opinion, lacks a lot of the character and soul that it used to. If you think nothing I'm saying is making sense, just watch what Boston and the rest of the state will look like by the end of the decade. The rents and the house prices in the eastern part of the state aren't about to go down anytime soon. If people are holding their breath for this, I'm sorry, they're not. Communities like my hometown of Gloucester will become ever more exclusive, with city leaders and their friends lining their pockets and doing nothing to protect longtime residents. Someone can buy the property you've lived in for decades and raise the rent as much and as often as they like, and in most towns and cities, there's nothing in place to protect the residents. Don't expect any sympathy when you call City Hall either. It just happened last year in my building. A property management company bought my building and the rents have tripled. Privately owned corporations now own more than 50% of private residents in the US. Not commercial or industrial, but private residential homes and apartments. Over 50%, and I guarantee you by 2030 that will be closer to 85-90%. With all the boomers getting too old to keep their properties and younger people not having the money to buy them themselves. This is the future, people. Sorry, but wake up. We're a prime example in the Bay State of what is happening in the country in general. The stark differences between the have and the have-nots, that's what I get out of what's going on in Boston and Springfield right now. It's just a microcosm for what's going on in our society overall. The gap between the rich and the poor is growing by the second. Beautiful shining cities like Boston will continue to build new developments like the Seaport District to cater to the very wealthy and the upscale. It's happening in my hometown. They closed all the dive bars that were frequented by the fishermen. Now it's upscale restaurants, hotels. They even just opened a beautiful new venue for music and live performances. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad, but they're obviously catering towards a specific clientele. There's no place left for a blue-collar clam digger and his young family here. That's abundantly clear. This city was definitely built on the back of hard-working fishermen, which the city has completely abandoned. Boston, too, in the 20th century. For good or bad, the glaring differences, whether you are Italian, Irish, African American, Cape Verdean, Dominican, I feel like the identity of being a Bostonian was mostly a rough blue-collar mentality, and now honestly I have no idea what the identity of the city is anymore. That's really why I started uploading these videos onto my channels, because I saw the city and the surrounding areas changing so rapidly. There wasn't a lot of content on YouTube about Boston or Massachusetts gritty past, and I just didn't want what I remembered growing up to be lost to memory. Seeing the stats between these two cities really drove home for me what I've been noticing for years, and it's just rapidly getting worse. Like I said previously, it's the land of the haves and have-nots. Boston and the surrounding areas have a lot going on, and the cities in Western Mass don't really have much going on besides crime, addiction, struggling economies, and school systems. I grew up in a working and middle class neighborhood. I'm not sure if there's even such a thing anymore. I see people arguing all the time for a living wage. How about just a lower cost of living? The tale of these two cities is a perfect example of what's going on overall in the state and really the whole country. It's a story of if you have money, the world is your oyster. And if you don't, well, then that's your problem. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. I'm sure a lot of people don't want to hear this and think it's kind of a downer, but I'm sick of playing a game that's clearly set up for me to lose every single time. I feel like they're not even trying to hide it anymore. It's so obvious today. But that's alright, guys. We can just talk about it when we're grocery shopping together at the Dollar Tree in Holyoke. Wishing we had that Whole Foods money, baby. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Remember, make good decisions, make good choices, because there are some things in life that we can control. Take good care of yourselves, your family, your friends, your fellow human beings, even the jerks. Try to have a good day. Talk to you guys soon. God bless.